Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Inspector Toolbelt Talk. Today, we have on a guest that I actually reached out to Philippe and asked him to be on the show after a post I saw that he made on Facebook. But we have Philippe Heller from the real estate inspection company down in San Diego. How are you, Philippe?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Yeah. And thanks for helping me pronounce your name properly. Philippe. It's the French version, right?
Correct. And being in San Diego, a lot of people always call me Felipe or Philip, and I'll answer to most anything, but it is Philippe.
All right, cool. Well, I like you already. Anybody who's kind of like, that's fine. Whatever you call me is good. Just shows that you're a humble, down to earth guy. So nice to have you on. So you actually had a court case recently that you were dismissed from, and I want to hear about that because one of the biggest fears any home inspector has, and sometimes it's a fear that's never even realized for a lot of inspectors that are smaller companies, is getting served with papers, and then
Mhm.
your stomach gets sick, and then you days and weeks of stress. But before we get into that, can you tell me a little bit about you and your company there, Philippe?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to. So I started the company in 2004. And a lot of business depends on timing. And I think I started at a really good time. It was in the run up of the real estate market. And at the time, a lot of us, a lot of inspectors who've gotten in since then, the industry has elevated quite a bit in the reporting software and all this stuff. When I started, it was still 3-ring binders or NCR reports, handwritten, and so introducing technology was kind of novel still. So I got in
Mm-hmm.
at a good time. I was able to introduce a lot of new stuff. We were one of the first companies in the country to include thermal imaging with every inspection, which allowed us to really bump up our prices and just include it. And I saw it as a great liability reduction for me. It wasn't just, hey, client, if you want me to use it, you got to pay me. I thought I want to use it at every inspection because it helps me find stuff. And it just worked out really well. So we ramped up and grew very quickly till 08, 09, when the market crashed. But we pivoted and started working with a lot of investors back then and kept going. And so we're going to celebrate our 20th anniversary next in March of next year. And so we're a mature company. We've got a lot of inspectors, a really uh, mature CSR team and product offering. So yeah, it's been good, a good run. It's been a difficult couple of years, but getting back to the podcast topic, which is the lawsuits. The longer you've been in business, you may not have been sued yet. It's going to happen, and it's not a reflection necessarily on how good you are or your inspectors if you're a multi-inspector firm. It has to do with somebody lawyering up because they know how the game is played. And once they get a lawyer, insurance companies just want to settle. So a lot of people, you as a home inspector, have a target on your back sometimes. And if there's any opening that somebody can see where they can make an argument, it doesn't even have to be that great of an argument, but they get a lawyer, send you a nasty sounding letter, and they wait for the insurance company to write them a check. And that's the way the game works. So don't lose sleep when you get served that first time. I know it's very upsetting.
Yeah, I remember the first time I got a ticket when I was like 17. I thought I was going to die. And it
Yeah.
was just a failure to not even stop, a failure to fully stop at a stop sign. And it's like I stopped, but he's like, yeah, I didn't. Anyways, at 17 years old, I'm like losing sleep. I'm like going to court. It's scary. The next thing I got a ticket, I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I was going 3 miles an hour above the speed limit, not the end of the world, not even a point on my license. Then they reduced it to parking on pavement. Not that I've gotten a lot of tickets, but it's just an illustration to say the first time it happens, we're scared to death. Do
Yeah.
you remember the first time you were ever threatened or served or anything like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, one time I got served on New Year's Eve day. Like it was late at night, 9 o'clock on no, it was New Year's Eve. And someone knocked on my door. I live in a bit of a rural part of San Diego. And so it's very odd that somebody would come by my door. And so, that just ruins the whole holiday. Like, it's late at night and you get this paper and you're immediately digging through like, who was it? What are they accusing us of? Which inspector did it? On and on and on. And I don't even remember the first time we got sued, but It's just you immediately go, like, my mind immediately now goes into, instead of being upset, I immediately go into defensive mode. Okay, let's get the pictures from the report. Let's contact the inspector and get their side of the story, see if they have any extra photos that were not in the report but may exonerate us. Let's look at the wording. Let's compare it to the standards of practice, and on and on. And so we immediately go into defensive mode. But for years, the mindset is, hey, you better tell your insurance company right away and hand it over to them, and that's it. And that's your only option. And sometimes it is. And a lot of it, which I want to touch on, is it depends on your deductible. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of the limiting factor, which I was very upset. We had a couple of claims, and so my E&O rates kind of skyrocketed. And they were high anyway because we're in California, a litigious state. And so they're high anyway. And the only way for me to get a handle on it was to have a higher deductible. Now we're lucky we can put money aside to absorb a big hit, like, a $10,000, $15,000 deductible if we have to pay it. And so that was one way to offset the high premium. But it turns out that I liked it now because it gives me room to fight before I have to turn it over to the insurance company. And I can go into that a little bit more if you want.
Yeah, just to kind of touch on that, we talked with Nick Grimico one time, and his angle is always to fight. And I do want to caveat all of this with the fact that you own a pretty large inspection company. You've been around a long time. I don't know how many inspections you do in a year, but it's probably more than a lot of home inspectors do in their entire career. Your
Yes.
company, how many you do. So I've always done the math of 1 out of 1,000 clients are going to be upset at me, and then 1 out of every so many of those are going to send an angry letter from their attorney, and 99 of those letters aren't going to turn into anything because the attorney's like, okay, let's throw some spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks.
Correct.
And then every once in a while, one of them turns into, all right, we're actually going to go to court, or deposition is usually where it ends up, and almost never goes to court.
Right. So, couple things. First of all, very often the first call you get is from the agent, not the client, because the client calls the agent, says, "Oh my gosh, I had a plumber out here, an electrician, and they said that the inspector screwed up and missed this item, and I'm really mad." And so the agent wants to look like the hero, so they call the home inspector on behalf of the client. And you know what? As good of a relationship as you think you have with an agent, they will turn on you. They are not your friend many times. Like, very few of them are truly, an advocate for you, and they trust you, and they'll push back on the client and say, "Hey, I know my guy's good. Let's talk about it." No, they come at you really strong. My one bit of advice is try and cut the agent out of the conversation as early as possible. Deal with the client directly, because the agent is going to leverage their relationship with you, and they're going to say, "Ian, I've used you for years, and I sent all my business, and I'll never use you again unless you pay for this thing," even if it's outside the scope of an inspection or 6 months later. So try and cut the agent out as fast as possible. Say you're going to keep him in the loop, but you need to, settle this matter with the client who you have a contractual agreement with. And because the client can't leverage this relationship with you, because agents will, and it's sad and it's frustrating, and I think that hurts more than actually receiving the letters.
Yeah.
When an agent you've worked with for 5 or 10 years, great relationship, you'll move heaven and earth trying to fit them into your schedule or pick up a weekend or something like that. And you think, man, we've got a really good connection. And the first time they call and they're screaming at you and they'll never use you again, that's terrible, So that's my one bit of advice. And then, do take as many photos as you can, even if they don't go in the report. There's some theory out there that you don't want to do that, because if you miss something and now it's in the picture, it's a gotcha. And you know what? It should be. You shouldn't be missing stuff. If you can take a picture of it, you should be able to see it. So make sure you or your team is really aware and observant, and try not to miss anything in the first place. I think that's one takeaway. But where are we going with that? Get me back on track.
Well, no, I'm actually writing stuff down as you're saying it. I love that point about cutting the agent out of the issue, because that's a deep thought, man, because I thought I was the only one who kind of felt like that the worst part of it was maybe even sometimes even a whole small office, like oh my goodness, never use this guy again, this and that. And the client's like yelling about some corrosion on a pipe above a water heater. And it's
Right.
like, what in the world? He's yelling about court over that? I'm like, it's not leaking or anything. So anyways, um, I'm writing this stuff down, but where I think we were headed was, you see a lot more volume of this than the
Hmm.
average home inspector.
Hmm.
So your take on this is very important. And I brought up Nick Grimico and his fight mentality,
Yeah.
because he's been through this a lot. He owned a very large inspection company, and he works with inspectors all over the country. And I tend to agree with that. I
Hmm.
don't roll over, but most of us tend to as an industry, and I think that's why we get so many demand letters. Um, I've never sent a
Exactly.
demand letter to my HVAC guy, but they don't roll over, but we roll over. And I think that set a terrible precedent.
So California has a unique liability situation too. In the business and professional code, by law, we cannot limit our liability. I
Hmm.
know inspectors in some states say, well, we just, in the contract, we say we limit it to the cost of the inspection. We can't do that here. So it's wide open to whatever, claim that they want to make. And so that's very frustrating. So we have to be super careful here. And as a result, our E&O insurance is quite high. So getting back to your point, the the thought process out there is you better tell your insurance company early, because if you don't and you make it worse, they could say, we're not covering you on this because you tried to handle it on your own. Okay, so we all have to, and I am not advocating that you don't tell your insurance company. You need to get them in the loop, but you also need to try and fight it, because the problem is, once you hand it over to the insurance company, their mindset is, let's get out of this as cheap as possible. Even
Hmm.
if we start to fight it, we have to pay an attorney and an adjuster and maybe send somebody out there and do all this stuff. And the dollars start going up. So their first call is, what's it going to take to get my client out of this mess? 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, whatever it is. And they look at that as cheaper than going to court. So they're just looking at the cheaper option. The
Hmm.
problem is, a long-term consequence is that they are validating the behavior. And so attorneys know that all they have to do is push the insurance company a little bit, and they're going to get weak in the knees and write a check to settle. So that's all they have to do. And they come at you with a high number, and they hope to get a check in here, and it never sees the inside of a courtroom.
Yeah, and I've been threatened many times. I got to the point where it's not like many times like every other inspection, but you do enough volume. I started about a year after you did.
Oh, okay.
You do enough volume, and eventually it's like, I'm gonna send you a demand letter for $10,000 or this or that. I started looking at them and saying, okay, they want 10 grand. It's going to cost them 30 grand to get that. I'm like, I started telling attorneys, okay, have at it. And it never went anywhere, because, they just expect you to roll over. So it's part of doing business. Three of the most litigious areas in the country are Southern California, where you are, Maryland, and, well, more specifically, Washington, D.C., not Maryland, rather, but Washington, D.C., and New York City. I'm just a few hours north of one of the most litigious areas in the country. So you kind of get used to what we call in my area, the city folk, coming up and buying a property and then trying to sue you. And I had one lady tell me, it's just cost of doing business. Just send this to your insurance company. We just want to be able to add a patio or something. To her, it was just like normal day to day.
Right.
And I'm like, no, this isn't normal day to day to me.
Now, they don't realize the consequences of what a claim does to your premium. They just think, oh, you just turn it in, you
Hmm.
probably pay $250, and it's just the insurance company. Like, who cares? It is a big deal, and the reason why is the three cities you mentioned, the courts are very unfavorable to businesses, and they will tend to side with the consumer over the business all day long. And the attorneys know that. They
Yeah.
say, I've got leverage over you, because if I threaten to sue you and you want to bring it to court, you're taking your chances, right? Because it's 60-40 that it's going to go the client's way instead of yours, just at face value. Like, you're starting with a handicap right there. Like, you have a target on your back, like I said before. So what's happened now is, as I said at the beginning, is our deductible is quite high. Because we do hundreds of inspections a week. Okay, so you can imagine I know some inspectors, they're up 2 or 3 inspectors under them say, well, I review all the reports and I'm so good, like nothing's going to get by me. When you start getting 10, 15, 19 inspectors, like we do, you're not checking every report. It's just impossible. You couldn't do it all day long, every day, check every report. So you really have to train well, rely on your team to be awesome, do spot check the reports, but it really is impractical to check each and every one. But because of our size, volume, and we've had some claims, and we are in California, so our premiums were ridiculous. So we chose to have a pretty high deductible of 25 grand. What this allows me to do, however, I still tell my insurance company, most callbacks we deal with just with the client. You know, they're small. It's like, oh, you missed a rusted faucet. Okay, you want $250. You want the inspection feedback. Great. Tell your friends we stand behind our work. Here's your check. Have a nice day. And that, makes most people happy. But when it starts getting into, 10, 20, 50, $100,000, you need to tell your insurance company. But you have the right to say, I want to fight this with my own attorney up until we hit the deductible limit. Okay. And you keep them in the loop. So they're, they kind of manage this process, but that's what we've done. So I have a great attorney here local to Southern California. He was president of CREA, which is the California Association of Inspectors. And anyway, he's super knowledgeable about our industry, and he's a fighter like me. He's just like, take no prisoners. He's actually turned around and countersued people who have sued us on ridiculous grounds. When I say us, home inspectors. And he's recovered a lot of money from plaintiffs who had unfounded claims. So I had a 25. Let's talk about this one lawsuit that we got dismissed from.
If I could, that's the next point I was going to ask you. But do you mind mentioning who that attorney is, in case the listeners want to know, or is that something that we want to?
Greg Pyfrom, and I can send you his contact information if anybody wants to reach out to him. Maybe you could put it in the show notes.
Yeah, how do you spell his name?
Greg Pyfrom, Pyfrom. And
okay, great.
And anyway, so this one recent case that we had, we didn't even get a demand phone call, nothing. We just got served from the buyer of this property, and he wanted $50,000 from us. He wanted money from the agents and from the sellers. So I'll paint the picture of what happened real quick. The sellers, it was an older couple who lived there for many years, and they were getting older, and they had to go to an assisted living. So the son said, don't worry about it. I'm going to fix up your house, sell it, and that's going to cover the cost of the assisted living as you age. And so he did some stuff very similar to a flip, right? He came in and he painted, and he did some stuff. One of the things he did in the backyard is he hired a landscaper to kind of fill in. It was the top of a little hill that was a cut lot, and it kind of sloped down. So he had some dirt put in there and extended the rear patio out and then tiled over the whole thing. So when we did the inspection, it looked great. There was all this fresh tile on this big patio, and took pictures, and there were no visible problems with it. Now, we had really big rains this winter, earlier this spring, and for whatever reason, the dirt underneath this patio settled a bit along the cold joint. It cracked. It came through the tile, and he's furious that we weren't able to predict that. And he was, holding pretty strong. His attorney wanted us to pay that 50 grand to fix this patio. And we just held to it that it was a concealed defect. There was no way. You want to go after the seller for concealing this and hiring an unlicensed landscaper to do this work, fine, but we're out. Like, our inspector did his job. And we got the blessings of the insurance company to fight it, and we did. It cost us some money. It cost us about 13 grand. But we eventually got, because we told him we were going to come after him and come after him for our attorney fees. And so we were able to get out of it with a waiver of cost, which means, hey, release us from this lawsuit and we won't countersue you for any money. We're just let's just walk away. And so we ate that, which I would have had to do anyway if I gave it to my insurance company, but they didn't get a penny from us or the insurance company. So it basically went to my lawyer to fight it. And so anyway, we got the release from this one lawsuit. It was very expensive, but that's what I said. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's dumb. Why don't you let the insurance company pay for it? You don't, they will recoup that money. So your premiums are going to go up. And so you may say
Hmm.
short term, let the insurance company pay for it. Long term, it sucks because they come back at you with much, much higher premiums.
Yeah, and it's those are some very good points that we need to do the math on. So your deductible, you said, is $25,000, I
Yeah.
believe. So it cost you $13,000 to
Yep.
defend it. If they had paid out, let's say 25 grand, it would have cost you
Yep.
more because your deductible would have so you actually saved 12
Mhm.
grand and you saved your money
Future
in your
Yep.
premiums. So I'm not even going to begin to guess what your premiums are. So let's say the average home inspector's premiums are $500 a month. Single guy, $500 a month. So now they pay out. They're going to grab that and say, okay, next time you have your renewal come up, it's going to be $1,000
Yep.
a month
And your
or more.
deductible's going up to, 2,500, 5,000, $10,000. And it escalates very, very quickly. Or, I mean, there are some cases where some home inspectors have not been renewed. Now, how do you function in this business without an E&O policy? Do you want to self-insure? It's pretty scary, you know? So
Yeah.
now we have another lawsuit pending, and it's an attorney who bought the house, and she's very aggressive. And they wanted $200,000 on the premise that the house makes settling noises in the afternoon, like, popping, house pop. It didn't happen during the inspection. We have statements saying it didn't happen from all the parties that were there. There's no way my guy could, there was nothing structural that you could point to say, well, if he had seen where this beam was connected or something that he should have seen it and called it out. That didn't occur. The house structurally is sound. And so, they're playing the game though, and you can see, once you understand it, you can see it. So their attorney, we have a court date, and he defers, deflects, delays. The plaintiff's husband had surgery and is having trouble recovering. The lawyer got in a car accident. Somebody died. I mean, on and on and on. We keep hearing all these excuses. What they're trying to do is push us closer and closer to that court date because they know that the insurance company is going to write them a check. They're loath to go to court. So that's what their game is to back you up against the wall. And then the insurance company's like, what do you want? 200,000, we'll give you 50. Okay. And then they're happy and they walk away. But again, they're going to come back and get that out of me one way or the other. So what the client did not count on is that I do have a high deductible and I hired a lawyer and I am not settling and we are going to countersue them. And so this is culminating, it's coming to a head. And we've since found that they did hear the noise prior to closing and they went ahead and closed anyway. And so
Hmm.
we feel like we have pretty good grounds. Like I'm of the mindset, like take us to court. We have a solid case. We're going to fight it. And when we win, we're going to turn around and we're going to sue you. And I'm going to recapture the money that I've spent.
There's that old war expression, I'm going to make them pay for every inch of ground with a gallon of blood. If the battle is hard enough and they see that they're going to have to pay with blood, it makes it not worth it.
Mhm.
So again, much smaller scale than you, but I've had times where people wanted to fight hard. And just out of principle, I'm just like, okay, let's fight back. And they're like, it's 15 grand or it's 10 grand. It's just like, okay, it's the principle
Yep.
of it. And I'm like, it's going to cost you 30 to get that 10.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Well, and so in most smaller inspection companies, you may have a $2,500 deductible or 1,500 or whatever. And you think, well, I'll just eat that.
Hmm.
That's better than paying 10 grand, right? But the insurance company
Yeah.
settles, and again, then next year you're going to be paying more anyway. So,
Yeah.
build up a reserve. Like we have what's called a callback fund, and each week we put quite a bit of money in that account and just build it up, and so that it's there for writing checks or paying for something. My company will pay to make things right if in fact we miss something. So build up a reserve, be prepared to fight, find a good local attorney who can at least respond with a very strongly worded response to a demand letter. Do get your insurance company in the loop if you think you can't make it go away with the return of the inspection fee. We need as an industry, and I think you mentioned Nick Gromyko, and he's known for this. He is a fighter. Like if the insurance companies don't stand up and start to fight and get the word out among these lawyers who think we're easy marks, easy target, if they don't start standing up and fighting and costing the plaintiffs money for doing this, and like you said, they're going to risk something. If we don't start doing that as an industry, this is going to continue. We need to fight.
That is a
Yeah.
very true. Yeah, that is a very true statement. And the reason it does continue is because we continue to roll over. But guys like you standing up, especially for bigger numbers like that. So let's be honest, the houses you inspect in Southern California are probably a lot nicer than most of them in my area.
More
So the
expensive for
defects,
sure.
and more expensive, I guess, is the term I should use. Yeah. So if you're inspecting a $3 million home and they have a $80,000 jetted tub, and they try to sue you over the 80,000 jetted tub, I'll be honest with you, there's houses in my area, the whole house cost 80 grand. So it's also area dependent. So if we're a single inspector and we're hearing these numbers, we're like, oh man. Or if we're a small inspection company, maybe 4 or 5 guys, we're like, oh no. Well, okay, it's probably not going to always be 50 grand or 100 grand. Most I find, and I don't know about you, most are going to be in the range of $5,000 to $15,000, just because that's the easiest money to get. I think the attorneys think, right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, I can get 10 grand out of this guy. Let's see if we can do it. It's not going to be worth
And
it to him. And those I think you
and
need
the
to fight.
agent and the seller. So if everybody ponies up 10 grand, it's a nice payday.
Yeah. But now, I liked your idea about putting away a fund. So I like to work things out on a graph and, math. If you have, let's say we're an inspector, we did 1,000 inspections last year with a couple of guys, and we had one complaint. So that means, or maybe we had 10 complaints. That means if we had 10 complaints, what's that? 1% of our inspections
Correct.
become complaints. Take 1% from every inspection and start auto depositing it in like a high yield bank account. Like there's tons of them now where you can get, 4 to 6% online of interest rate, and keep putting that in there. Or even better, just even more of a cushion, double or
We do
triple that
2%.
number.
So we're thinking the exact same way. We want to keep our
Perfect.
callbacks. It's going to happen. You're going to refund some money, like in this business, at any business, you're going to refund some money for customer service, just for good, PR. We eyeballed 2%, saying we want to keep callbacks under 2%, but let's make sure that's what's in a savings account. Some people,
That's
50
awesome.
bucks per inspection or 20 bucks or whatever that works for a one person shop, right? But I would say as you get bigger, just go for a percentage of your revenue and put that away.
Yeah, that's awesome that we were on the same page with that number. But yeah, 2% is kind of what I like to have in any kind of reserve. And then if you don't use it, cool. Roll it over to next year and still put 2%
take some for
away.
bonuses because your team did well. But and save it. So it never hurts to have money in savings, right? So it's just a good, and it's very comforting to sleep at night when you have that there, and you know that, hey, you can write that check. So because it's going to happen.
I've always thought it was funny that sometimes single inspectors will be like, oh man, I don't want to put any money away. I'm like, you don't want to put $20 away from your inspection? I'm like, $20
Raise
is
your
lunch.
Price and getting back to your about houses in different areas being more expensive. We add when and almost our median price is $1 million here, right? So you can buy a dog of a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house built in the 60s that's never been upgraded, and it's $1 million, so it's kind of crazy. But we do adjust pricing in certain zip codes that are super high end. Because the same condo or house that's in Encinitas right on the beach, and then you go inland 40 minutes, there could be a $600,000 difference in that price. The house being exactly equal, but the liability, the risk, etc., maybe the upgrades on the house by the beach, it's going to be more expensive. So you're perfectly justified in charging more based on the value of the home. Just like realtors get paid, they hate this idea when you present it to them. Why is this one more expensive? Well, it's a $1.8 million 2-bedroom house. And so we are charging more because the liability is higher. You can't get paid based on the value of the house. Well, agent, you do. You're selling the same house and you get paid more, and there's higher risk. So we do charge more based on zip code and price.
That's a great point too. I really like the way you think. But we've had a couple of different guests talk about that. Mike Ortiz and Kevin Maxwell do the same thing. And I remember one time, one of the vice presidents of Coldwell Banker, there's a place near me called Saratoga. It's actually one of the third most populated area of millionaires in the country. But the houses there aren't unusually expensive, million, $2 million. But when I inspected his house, the agent asked me, why did you charge so much more per square foot on this? And I walked over, just as one example of what we were looking at right there. I'm like, you see that water heater right there? There's two of them. Look up the price of not just installing, but just the actual price of buying that water heater. It was specially ordered, and I forget, it was like $3,000. I'm like, there's two of them. Those are just the water heaters for the house. And there's another water heater on the second floor for the radiant floor heating. And then there's 3 heating units, and not just the number of them, but the value. I'm like, that heating unit is probably worth more than my truck outside. So
we have houses where the stove is worth more than your car. Like,
I know, it's crazy,
giant,
right?
Gorgeous stoves that are 20, 30 grand. So yeah, there's more risk. I'm sorry, there is. It's not just a square footage thing anymore.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's not square footage, and I do like that thinking. But when talking about liability too, some very basic stuff that a lot of home inspectors don't know, like a businessman at your level, like making sure we have an LLC. And even if we're a single member LLC, having our annual meeting so that they can't pierce the corporate veil, because that's the first thing they're going to do on a single member LLC is pierce the corporate veil, which means they come after you personally, so you lose that protection. Yep. Make sure.
And definitely have an LLC or a corporation, whatever suits, talk to your attorney or your CPA, whoever you trust to do that, and definitely set up your business and have those meetings and document them.
Yeah. And having operating costs, because if you don't have operating costs, people are like, oh, just take all the money out of the company and then they can't get anything. No, they'll just pierce the corporate veil. You can't do that. Enron ruined that for everybody, jokingly saying that. But yeah, making sure we have all that in place. Do you find with this particular case that you had and a couple of others that you've had recently, is there some things that you go back and maybe do differently? Or there's some things you're like, man, I got to do that every time. I really nailed it there.
Having a solid inspection agreement, and you must absolutely get it signed before you set foot and start doing that inspection. Don't wait till the end because it's a nuisance and, it's kind of awkward to say, hey, I need this. No, you get that signed or you don't do the inspection. I don't care about payment even. Get your inspection agreement signed before you do the inspection, or it is worthless in court. It will be thrown out under the auspice that it was signed under duress. And a court can just toss that agreement like it's nothing. Put in a liquidated damages clause in there telling people that, hey, you can sue me, but if you lose, you're paying all my attorney fees. So put a liquidated damages clause in that. Again, I'm not an attorney, but this is just from my experience that you want to have it in the contract. It's funny because the one larger lawsuit that we're still in, she's an attorney. So she can't use the excuse that, well, I didn't read the contract, because what kind of attorney would that be? Because then I'll just report her to the bar and, anyway. So have a good solid IA. I don't think that attorney realized that we were going to have such a high deductible and willing to fight. She thought it was going to be easy because now they're kind of backpedaling. And anyway, so she kind of attacked the wrong company. And I'm sure in hindsight, she wishes she went with a, one-man operation that was just more, I don't know, inexperienced than we are, because now she's got her hands full. But document, take a lot of pictures, and line up, make some relationships with a good attorney in your area that understands the business. B, some contractors who you could reach out to and say, hey, I need your help. I need you to write a statement saying that whatever, the roof was installed properly, or, the water heater and whatever. So reach out, build connections with licensed tradespeople in your area who'd be willing to vouch for you that your people did a good job. And at the end of the day, don't miss anything. Like, do a good, solid job. Don't be an inspector trying to do 4 inspections a day. Get it. You want to hustle and make the money. Raise your prices, stick to 2 and do a super thorough job. Go back through the house, train your people. When you think you're done, put down everything but your flashlight, and you go through that house again. Lighting has changed, your mindset's changed, you know more holistically about the house. You know, you may see a stain, you may see something that you didn't see the first time. And, you know, you do these things, write your reports well. Don't nail yourself down by saying one failed window was observed in the master bedroom, and it turns out there's 3 because weather conditions changed. And now they say, well, you missed the other 2, so you got to pay for them all. Leave yourself wiggle room, you know. A window was observed. Others may have failed as well. We recommend getting them all checked by a you know, qualified window contractor.
Man, that's
Yeah.
poetry, man. I like the way you think, Felipe. Or Philippe. See, I did it again, Philippe. Those are extremely important points. I've always said the same thing about a single item defect when there's multiple versions of it. Not saying there's one loose tile. Why limit yourself? A loose tile was noted,
Yep.
others could exist, have it examined by a professional. It doesn't take much longer, doesn't take any longer, and now you're covered, and people think you're amazing. They're like, he told me to check the other tiles, and I found 8 more that were loose.
Smart enough. My
Yay!
inspector was knowledgeable enough to know that just because he saw one window that failed, it could mean that others have failed too. Like, it just shows that, and you don't
Yeah.
have to be an expert, right? It's like being your general practitioner, your doctor, that your family doctor. And you go in there and you go, hey, doctor, I've got a lump on my neck. And he goes, yeah, you do have a lump on your neck. I think you should go see an oncologist to check everything. You know, he may not know cancer, right? But he tells you to go to the right doctor and look all over, not just here. You know, check the whole thing. So we really, as an industry, you know, always keep learning as well, because technology's changed. You know, when I started, tankless water heaters were never unheard of, you know, and then those came out, and then, you know, all sorts of technologies we could talk about, you know, HVAC systems that have become more and more efficient. And how do you understand those? Keep learning. You don't know everything. Be humble and do your homework and document your reports really well. If you're just racing through doing the minimum standard of practice because you think that's safer, and I know some people will argue stick to the minimum standard of practice, I disagree, because if you do get to court, they're going to use what's called the standard of care. And they're going to say, well, Ian, we know you did a basic home inspection, but in your area, all of the other inspectors would have checked this item. Like, they all would have done this. You know, you didn't check appliances because according to the standards of practice, appliances aren't a part of a home inspection, but all the other inspectors in your area would. So you didn't live up to the standard of care to the consumer that other inspectors would have done. So if you're surrounded by a lot of high-level home inspection companies in your area and you're doing a basic standard of practice inspection, you're going to get hammered. You can't hide behind the standards of practice. So
We should totally just take that one clip out and have a whole separate podcast. Exactly. That's well said. You know what I like about you, Philippe, is, you know, a lot of times we have this image of somebody who's a fighter. Like, oh, you have to be that kind of guy. You have to be a bulldog. You remind me of that expression. I think Theodore Roosevelt said it. I could be wrong. Speak softly, but carry a big stick.
Yeah, be humble. Stand behind your work. Don't hide. If you screwed up, you missed something, pay for it. You know, stand up and learn from it. What's the saying? You're not losing, you're learning, right? So it costs you a few $100, but that really makes you remember it. So stand behind your work. And do the best job you can at every single inspection, because we don't have a second bite at that apple. We get one shot at that inspection. So you got to be right, provide great customer service. But when you're wronged, stand up and fight, you know, hold your ground, 100%.
Awesome. Well, we're running out of time, but I got to say, I could talk all day. This podcast is full of gold. Thank you for that. You know, you've built up 20 years of experience. And just by my guesstimate in my head, hundreds of thousands of inspections over the years. That's experience that you can't get anywhere else, and you just freely gave it to us. So thank you, Philippe. That's awesome.
Yeah, there's lots of topics we can go into. So just let me know.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back on the show. And great job getting dismissed from that case. I count that as a win. And thank you for setting a good standard in the industry for the rest of us.
Great,
we appreciate 100%.
Thanks, Ian. Take care.
Thank you.